Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Appreciate you joining me here on this podcast for another wonderful week and another wonderful year. So happy new year to those of you that have been listening regularly. If you're new here, welcome. And before I get into today's episode, I've got a few favors to ask. Please make sure you're subscribed on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. You'll be able to find this episode on all the major podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google. It is on all of them. So make sure you're subscribed. And if you're able to leave us a 5-star review, please go ahead and do that, because by doing it, it helps get the podcast out to more people. You can also find us on the socials at The Unstoppable Dad on Instagram, The Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook, and you'll be able to find the video version of this podcast up on YouTube. So if you like to actually see who's talking to you, I publish it each week on a Wednesday to the YouTube and to the Facebook page. So you'll be able to find the video versions of this podcast on there. This week, being that it is the first episode of 2024, I did an episode last week talking about goals and talking about just reassessing things, and that's been a pretty common theme over the last few weeks. And what I wanted to talk about is a saying that I use with the kids a lot, and I've been thinking about deep diving into different meanings for this particular saying, and the saying is eyes forward. And I say it to the kids a lot because, when they're walking around, when they're doing something, they'll have a tendency to not pay attention to what it is that they're doing. So they'll be looking at their feet, they'll be looking backwards, they might be running and looking backwards. So telling them eyes forward is more just to be aware where you're going and what you're doing. But it's just more about, the saying when I say it to them is about being mindful of what they're doing, rather than saying be careful, go slower, rather than kind of letting them be their full throttle selves, but trying to bring to their attention that maybe they're not paying attention as much as what they should be. And I say that quite a bit, eyes forward, because, I want them to be able to be in a position where they're going to be able to take measured risks. They're not going to be overly cautious sometimes, like they're going to stretch themselves and they push themselves. So I don't particularly want to constantly be telling them don't do that. When it's physical stuff, like when we're running around and playing and all that type of thing, I want them to still be able to express themselves and push the limits and push the boundaries in a safe way. Obviously, there's going to be things that I am obviously going to tell them don't do that. Like, kids do need to know where the boundaries are, but I also want them to be able to explore where those boundaries are. So telling them, for me telling them eyes forward is my way of saying, hey, be mindful of what's going on and look forward to the future. But the more I've been saying it, the more I've been thinking of how that applies to just life in general, right? Because a lot of the time, myself included, a lot of us are guilty of dwelling on the past and dwelling on things that have happened and letting that affect what's going on in the present and what's going to happen in the future. And look, there are going to be things that are going to happen in the past or that you've done in the past which are potentially going to have an impact on what's going to happen in front of you. But given that it's a new year, and given that a lot of people are starting to look to the future, they're looking at what their next 12 months will want to look like, I thought going over a few things from the point of view of eyes forward was probably a pretty timely thing. And the thing with eyes forward is we want to look to the future. We want to look to the future in a positive light and not let our past mistakes or the things that we've done in the past affect what is going to happen moving forward. But in saying that, eyes forward from the point of view of a saying or a mantra or however you want to use that, I like to think of it as it is not only just looking to the future, but it's being mindful of what is going on right now. When I'm using it with the kids and I'm telling them that I want eyes forward, I want them to look at what they're doing. It's not just about looking at what's in front of them. It's being mindful of what's going on inside, rather than walking around looking at their feet or looking behind them and not being cognizant of what's going on around them. The saying itself for me has a hidden meaning where I'm encompassing all of that. And that's the same as the rest of my life and the rest of the lives of the people that I coach, or your life, or whatever the case might be. But we want to make sure that we've got that constant forward momentum. And if we're constantly looking behind us, it makes it very hard to continue to push forward, to explore those boundaries, and to be mindful of where we are in the present. Now, that doesn't mean that if we do something in the past, we don't take the time to learn from that experience at all. We definitely need to take some time to assess what has happened, especially if we see it as a negative event or we see it as a negative experience. If we don't take that time to learn from it and to grow from it, then we're going to more than likely remake that mistake over and over and over again. Whereas if we can take the time quickly to learn from it, and we can assess that situation and go, righto, let's just change the course and change the trajectory just a little bit, and then we get our eyes forward again and we start to move forward. Because there is no point in sitting in the past. There is no point in sitting in our past mistakes, and no point in constantly dwelling on that, because I know personally that if you do that, you not only don't have any momentum moving forward, it will then adversely affect everything else that you endeavor to do moving forward, because you're letting something from your past hold you back. And I know it's probably something that a lot of us hear very regularly, like look to the future. Look to the positive stuff that you have going on in your life. But I think it's a very good reminder for a lot of people at the start of the year, because when we are looking at what we want to do, it will highlight our shortcomings and it will highlight the things that we haven't been able to do. Like the end of the year for most people is a time of reflection, and it's a time where they will either celebrate what has happened. And for most of us, if you've got to the end of the year, and even if your situation hasn't improved with everything that's going on in the world, it's probably a win. Like sure, there's going to be things that maybe you fell short of, but you can look at that in a positive light, or you can look at it in a negative light. Like it's entirely about your perspective. Now, that doesn't, I've said this quite a bit on the podcast over the last 6 to 12 months. You can be happy with where you're at and still want to improve over the next 12 months. Being happy with what you've achieved over a 12-month period doesn't mean that you shouldn't want more over the next 12 months. But by looking to the future after you've learnt from the past, we can start to be a little bit more optimistic about what we can achieve and what we can do. And when we're looking at things in a retrospective light, I know I do. I know a lot of people that I talk to do. Sometimes we just look at it in a really negative way. Like we tend to focus on the things that we haven't done rather than focus on the things that we have done or the progress that we've made. And I think you need to focus on both. You need to have a healthy dose of both when you're looking to what you want to do in the future. If you're constantly focusing on the negative, that's going to affect you. If you're constantly focusing on the positive too, as bad as this might sound, and you think that everything's rosy and maybe there's these things that really aren't, it may stop you from taking the required action to move forward. Like there needs to be, I feel for me personally, and it's not going to be the same for everybody, but there needs to be this level of discomfort around, hey, maybe I dropped the ball a little bit on that particular thing, so I need to work a little bit harder in order to progress it a little bit more this year. But I did really well over here, so I'm going to give myself a pat on the back over here. But then with these things, I know I need to do a little bit more. I need to work a little bit harder. And then I've just spent the time assessing what I've done in the past, but I'm not letting it affect me. I'm not going, hey, I'm not constantly telling myself, you did really bad on this all the time. I'm not constantly looking back. Once I've spent that time, that short amount of time looking back, assessing what's happened, and then formulating a plan for myself, my eyes are forward again, and I'm starting to get that forward momentum, and I'm taking action to change that situation. Because you need to, again, it's such a common thing. I did a podcast interview this week on a podcast called the Young Dad Podcast. It's the second time I've been on there. And when we were talking about a lot of the topics on that, I kept looping back to, it's just like, you just have to do something. You have to take action. It's all very well and good to have these very well thought out plans and to take that time to assess what's happened in the past and then letting the past go and then having our eyes forward and looking towards the future. But then when you're looking towards the future, if you're not taking action, then you're going to get to that same place you were in 12 months' time and be down on yourself because you've spent another 12 months not achieving the thing that you wanted to achieve. And that's that when you get into a mode where you've done that for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the case might be, that's where your self-confidence starts to take a major hit because you're not keeping your word to yourself. It's all very well and good to have your eyes forward and have all these great grand plans about what you're going to achieve, but unless you're taking action with it, you are not going to feel great. You are going to find yourself in the same position at the end of the year, and then that's going to open a whole Pandora's box of other feelings, feeling overwhelmed, feeling slightly depressed, like your self-confidence is going to take a hit, and it's not a position you want to be in. So not only do you need to have your eyes forward and be looking to the future, but you need to be moving forward by taking action. You need to be looking for that constant forward momentum, and that is really, in essence, what the eyes forward, when I say eyes forward, what it's about. Look to the future, have a plan to the future, but be moving forward. Push those boundaries in a way where you're aware of what is going on around you. You're in the present moment, but while you're in the present moment, you're also you're taking that action which are going to move what you want to achieve forward over time. And by putting in that work, it's going to pay off later. The eyes forward, I guess, saying is that if you take the steps now, it is going to pay off later on. It is that delayed gratification. And with, I think, anything that we do which is going to mean anything to us or those close to us in our life, there is always going to be an element where I need to put in a good amount of work now in order to get that payoff in the long term. It doesn't matter whether it's your health, it doesn't matter whether it's financial, business, whatever the case might be. You are going to have to do thankless work in the moment now, which is going to, if you continue to do it and you're consistent with it, and it is sending you in that right direction, where it is not, you are not going to see dividends on that until later on in the future. And sometimes that might not be a matter of months. It might be a matter of years or matter of decades that you're going to have to put in the work now, but have your eyes forward on what you want to achieve and where you're going with it, and understand that it's a long-term game, but we're looking forward with it. We're not looking behind us. We're not running away from what we've done. We're moving towards something that is special to us, that's important to us, and it's something that we want to achieve and that is going to improve us as a person. It's going to improve our life and hopefully the lives of the people that are important to us, because at the end of the day, for me and for a lot of dads I talk with and a lot of people I run into, you know, we want to do things for more than just ourselves. We want to do things for those that are important to us, whether it be to enhance our quality of life so that we can share that with them, or enhance their quality of life. And in order to do that, you can't spend the time looking backwards. You've got to start to spend some time looking forwards and understanding that the actions that you put in now are going to go and contribute a long way to what is going to happen to you in the future. So as I wrap this up, 2024, it's a new year, it's a clean slate for a lot of people. Spend some time assessing things that you did well, things that you didn't do well, and things that you want to change. But once you've done that, get those eyes forward. Start looking to what you want to achieve and start taking that action now. Eyes forward for me is about not only just that constant forward momentum, but it's about being aware of what's around us and what is happening to us now so that we can keep moving forward and we can keep our eyes to the future. So Let me know what you think. Let me know if you might articulate it in a different way. For me, it's just something that seems to have stuck over the last couple of years that I keep saying a lot of, and it might finally be sticking in with the kids too, because I hear them say back to me very often when they know they're not aware of what's going on. They're like, eyes forward. I'm like, exactly. So hope if it's something you want to use to, go ahead, use it as much as you can. It's probably something I've heard from somewhere else, and it's just something that's stuck in my life. So take care. I wish you all the best for a successful 2024. And if you need help with anything as it comes to training, mindset, and getting your health back on track, you can reach out on the social media. There is a link in the show notes where you can book in a time. I'm giving away free 30-minute remote consultations via Zoom for the rest of the month of January. So if you want to book in one, jump in. There is a link in the show notes. You can jump in and book in there. But other than that, I will catch you all next week. Goodbye.